Well, hello, we're going to finish off chapter 21 of Deuteronomy today. And, well, let's read it. Starting from verse 15, reading from the NIV. If a man has two wives, and he loves one but not the other, and both bear him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the wife he does not love, when he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the right to the firstborn to the son of the wife he loves, in preference to his actual firstborn, the son of the wife he does not love. He must acknowledge the son of his unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double share of all he has. That son is the first sign of his father's strength. The right to the firstborn belongs to him. If someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother, and will not listen to them, and they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate. They shall say to the elders, "This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Then all the men of his town are to stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. If someone guilty of a capital offence is put to death and their body is exposed on a pole, you must not leave the body hanging on the pole overnight. Be sure to bury it the same day, because anyone who is hung on a pole is under God's curse. You must not desecrate the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. So we have another delightful section of Scripture. Again, another one which we find, what's going on about here? Is this really from God? And just to remind you what it says in 2 Timothy 3:16, all Scripture, all, is God-breathed, including this bit we've just read, and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. So, if we take that as our guiding principle, not the fact that we find it difficult to understand or perhaps react against some of the things it says. Doesn't mean pretend we don't find things difficult or ask why. What does this mean? That's perfectly fine, but don't just ignore it. So, if we start with the first bit about the man having two wives. Right, the principle in Genesis was one man, one woman. And Jesus affirmed that principle. And throughout the New Testament, the pattern is one man, one wife. One man, one woman. But then we still in the early parts of the Old Testament, it was quite common for, at least for prominent people, including David for that matter, to have more than one wife. And then we find little bits of the law here and there, like here. If a man has two wives. And in the last video I said that, the law's a big thing. There's many facets to it. There's what you might call the moral law, there's a civil law, and there's the sacrificial law. And in some way, one that feature of the law is that it is prophetic. It is pointing towards the cross, but not the bits here. So and I said in the last video, one thing to do, it is dealing, but the law, it was given for dealing with a sinful people, knowing the weaknesses and failings of men and women. So, in those days, one, it would be more likely for men to die than women because they would die in battle. And a woman really did need a man. If you object to that, tough. It was just the way it was. So it's kind of accepting the situation and mitigating it. I've got to work in and get to limit the effects of the problems of it. In fact, one thing is, there's a guy called, I think it's Altmaier or something like that. And he points out, I think he's Jewish, he points out that having more than one wife never worked out well. You'll see problems again and again with people when talking about where they had two wives, or two or more. The prime example of that, of course, is Solomon. He had, 700 wives and 300 concubines. Man's an idiot. But anyway, that's going to cause you problems. Having more than one is going to cause you problems. And here we have, right, so a man has got 2 wives. Sometimes he's going to prefer one to the other. One over the other. And here it says, right, the actual firstborn son is the one who gets the firstborn inheritance. Now, the firstborn, under the law, got a double portion. So I kind of got 2 units compared to the 1 unit that the other sons would get. It says, right, even if the man doesn't like his first wife, or the wife of the actual oldest firstborn son, it's the firstborn son who gets the firstborn inheritance, like it or not. So it's mitigating the human frailties, if you like. Then we come on to the rebellious son, and it says mum and dad should try to discipline him if he will not learn from the discipline. And there's an important point there. You can discipline people properly. It doesn't guarantee they'll learn from it. They have a responsibility to learn from it, as we all do. So, but if he's refusing to learn anything from this, they're to take him before the elders, and then he's to be stoned to death. Now, we're not going to stone anyone to death today. Let's just take that as read. But I suppose the equivalent situation would be parents taking a disobedient son to the police if he was guilty of a serious crime. And it's the importance of sin, and it says, you must purge evil from among you. Sin is sin, and sin is utterly destructive, and something has to be done about it. Then the final bit, which I've really not got anything to say on about at all. Someone's guilty of a capital offence, put to death, body exposed on a pole, it must be buried the same day. Well, fine. I haven't anything useful to say on it, so I won't say any there. We'll be on to chapter 22 the next time we're in Deuteronomy.